Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we're talking about EXOSISTER. If you didn't see the first part of this video, go check it out. We basically do the same thing we're doing in this video, but we cover Rescue Ace. We talk about what that archetype has, what that archetype would love to get over the next calendar year in its new support. Not that any support is officially confirmed, but if you didn't hear, if you've been under the rock, Tactical Tridex 2025 got announced a couple weeks ago. And the two archetypes confirmed for it are Rescue Ace and, of course, EXOSISTER. The tactical Tridex that were confirmed for last year ended up getting indirect support for 3 straight core sets, like just cards that weren't exactly in their archetype, but were pretty nice for them overall. And then in the final core set, the 4th core set for basically a whole calendar year, that's when all 3 archetypes got 2 cards to boost them. So that's kind of the formula I expect to see for these two. We'll see if it goes exactly the same or if they edit the formula a little bit here, but that's kind of what I'm expecting at this point in time. So, EXOSISTER, I would say it's pretty like a pretty fan favorite archetype. I don't know. It's kind of a waifu archetype. You have these girls, they're all based around kind of punishing your opponent from playing out of the graveyard. And it's Exceed based, doesn't use your graveyard, so Shifter seems pretty strong there. And it has some strong points. It really, really does. But I think it does have some clear deficiencies in modern day as opposed to when it was actually decent, a year or two ago. So let's go through it. Starting off as far as like what the archetype has, you got to start with Martha. She is the best card in the archetype. She is your Mathmech Circular kind of card. Like every line feels like goes through her. Even if you're not using her to start your play, you are getting to Mikalis ideally, and then she is searching you Martha, and then Martha helps you continue with your line from there. So she's just part of everything. She is so good. Without normal summoning, she gets you 2 bodies on field. That's insanely strong. She does hard lock you though, so she does lock you. This deck, she's so integral to the deck, and she locks you out of special summoning anything that is on an EXOSISTER the turn you use her main effect. That is a tough one, because looking at what these other archetypes have gotten, at least from like last year's deck build pack, they got like 3 different cards at least, or waves you could call them, of indirect support. That support cannot be monsters that special summon themselves, that are not EXOSISTERs. Only them, like, you know what I mean, for an archetype like this. So I'd be curious to see what they do with that. But regardless, she's very crucial, and she hard locks you, which is very important. Then you have a bunch of these other names. Ellis is so fine. If you control an EXOSISTER, you can special from hand. Sure. Basic extender, I guess. Sophia can draw you a card if you control a different EXOSISTER monster. Sure. Stella can special another name from hand. This is probably the worst one. Yeah, I guess. Her or Irene, they're both pretty awful. And then Irene can like put an EXOSISTER card from your hand back on the bottom of the deck and draw a card. So mid. These two are miraculously unremarkable to me, and that may be something we focus on, which we'll come back to. Anyway, you also have a really good card in packs. This is a phenomenal engine card. This is either Rhoda or E-Tele, kind of. You can add an EXOSISTER from your deck to your hand. Then if you added a monster, you can special summon it if the other EXOSISTER monster mentioned is on your field or graveyard. So most of the time it's just searching you Martha, which is already good enough on it in its own right. But if you already have any of the names on field, this just becomes E-Tele at that point. So really good. I love quick plays like this. This means this card can, if you open 2, you can use 1 to get your play started turn 1. The other one can just be set and used as kind of an interruption on the opponent's turn as well. So I like that. Armament, pretty terrible. I think this card's just so rough because you can only activate this card during your opponent's turn unless your opponent controls a monster summoned from the graveyard specifically. That's just asking for so many hoops to be jumped through. I guess going second, it has some utility, but it just feels so bricky in most scenarios. So I feel like this card's pretty much a wash. Carpe Divin's always been an interesting card. It gives you the ability to lock your opponent from using cards with specific names. You can like declare a specific name, and like your opponent can't use cards like they're like negated basically on the field for the rest of that turn, which is pretty interesting. It allows you to either play around certain cards when your opponent searches them, negate certain stuff, or even just keep yourself from losing to like a specific and non-engine card, stuff like that. So it's an interesting card. Doesn't seem more like a one of, more than a one of, but like it's a fun card, I think. You have two traps, Returnia and Vadis. Returnia is really powerful. It's potentially two banishes, or it's like a banish and a quick exceed on the opponent's turn. Both quite good. Either way you do it, so really powerful. And then Vadis, able to special summon two EXOSISTERs straight from the deck. That's also very strong, because they then can trigger when your opponent does stuff from grave. So get to two more Exceed monsters from there, and the Exceeds are actually pretty decent. So that's where we go from there. We get to Mikalis. This is the one I mentioned earlier. Mikalis, she's phenomenal. She one can just search an Exorcister spell or trap, and then also if she was summoned that turn using an Exosister, she gains a quick effect to just like target a card on your opponent's field or grave and banish it. Very good card, especially with how you're able to make this on the opponent's turn relatively easily. This card is very, very good. You also have Caspatel. She's the counterpart, whereas Mikalis only searches spells and traps. Caspatel searches monsters, namely Martha, obviously. And then also this card has the ability to take keep your opponent from being able to special summon from the graveyard for the rest of the turn, which in some matchups actually can be pretty decent as an interaction. But there's that. Jabrine, she's kind of like a quick effect imperm. She's fine, but like bonus utility. And then Asophiel, she keeps your opponent from, or either player actually, from activating card effects in the graveyard this turn. So actually pretty strong. She's kind of like an in-archetype dweller, which is kind of nice because this is a rank 4 deck that can't go into generic rank 4s because you're almost always using Martha. So you're locking yourself out of generic stuff, but then you still have a card like this in the deck that can still basically be a dweller. And she also has the benefit of also being able to just bounce a card once per turn. So also pretty decent. And then you also have the final boss monster. This is Magnifica. This is normally we're trying to pass on because she has like a quick effect to banish, and then also she can tag out into another name. So you normally will like banish something with her, then summon Mikalis, and then Mikalis can also banish something. So she's like a double banish, which is pretty strong by itself. So we like that, especially if you're backing it up with Vadis or Returnia. You might just have like 4 banishes, which is very strong. But yeah, you have good enough utility in the extra deck. I honestly feel like there's not that much missing from the extra deck specifically. So that's a pretty good part about this that I like. On top of that, as far as some generic cards that are also worth mentioning, 7th Tachyon. This card just came out in the TCG, but it is a very nice addition to the deck. If you were ever worried about consistency, as long as you have the budget for it, you shouldn't, because with this and 7th Ascension to search this deck can get to Martha. You now have like 12 copies of Martha at least, which is very, very nice. So I like that. D-Shifter, this is a very big one to keep in mind. This is maybe the number one reason we saw this deck cease like decent runway as a rogue deck in the game, is because it was one of the better shifter decks in the game. So that's something, the deck would probably hope to continue to take advantage of, is just being one of the better shifter decks in the game for sure. Aratama and Sakitama are the last cards we're going to talk about here. These cards are really interesting because even though I said that Martha locks you out of special summoning, these spirit cards are very specific in that they do not special summon. They actually, even Sakitama gives it the ability to give you like additional normal itself from hand, and Aratama just being a 1-card rank 4 to get you Sakitama, also really nice. So it works around the lock already by itself. If we got better main deck names, we may not need these, but it's still worth mentioning at the end of the day. So where do we land on these? Where do we land with EXOSISTER overall? I would say the main deck is where I would focus on looking at it at this point to like help the deck be a little more well-rounded. I like the utility in the extra deck. Magnifica is easy enough to make. It feels pretty impactful on the end board. You have good utility, whether it's you can search monsters, you can search spells and traps from the extra deck monsters, and you can also you have a banish, you have a dweller like effect, you have an imperm like effect, you have the ability to stop your opponent from summoning from grave for the rest of the duel or turn. And multiple banishes, including Magnifica. If I was just talking about Mikalis earlier, but I feel like the extra deck's pretty well rounded. They could add an additional extra deck name. I wouldn't be shocked at that if they went that route. That's not what I would look for. I think the main deck is really what you want to focus on. I think the biggest underwhelming aspect of this deck is how fragile it is. Martha is phenomenal. But the downside to Martha is a lot of times she's really your only line. The other names are not nearly as good at helping you even just get to an Exceed monster. If I felt like they were confident, like they were competent enough to like get you to an Exceed, I'd feel so much better about them. But Martha summons a name from deck. So like this card getting ashed already puts you in a dicey situation where like you have to open one of the lesser names, but like you also don't want to play too many of the lesser names because they're just not very good, and you just don't want to fill up your main deck with a bunch of lackluster names. I get it. Seventh Tachyon would help this too. Like if Martha's getting ashed, you'd be able to just search the girl that summons one from hand or summons herself from hand, and then just like normal Martha after she's been ashed, and then like summon, make a rank 4, and like try and go from there. You can do some stuff from that vantage point, but like it's still not that good. I feel like one of the like best, I don't want to say coolest, but like best things this deck would really, really reap heavy benefits from is a second Martha. And I don't want it to be that simple. I don't want them to just print literally Martha, but like have a different, maybe a different name. Like Martha pairs with Ellis, but like pair her with a different name, and maybe they make a second name with it, whatever. But like a secondary name that like, and maybe this other new one is a normal summon, because that's another thing too. Aratama, I guess, is sort of the best normal summon the deck has access to right now, but it's not a name. It can't be searched off 7 Tachyon, by the way, because it's a dark, so it's awkward. So it's not searchable off packs. It's not searchable off 7 Tachyon. So it is just a hard 3 of. Whereas if they made a second EXOSISTER name that was, let's just call it a 1-card rank 4, even if it has to be your normal summon, it's now just your best normal summon in the deck, you would be able to go like activate Martha. Martha gets ashed. Well, you might have Pax, that's a 3 of, Tachyon, that's a 3 of, and maybe you're even playing Ascension as well. So potentially up to 9 or 12 copies, including 3 copies of the card itself, of this, other name, and now your deck is way more consistently able to beat, specifically stopping Martha, basically. And so I feel like that's the biggest thing for the deck is probably fragility. It really feels like this deck can be shut down by one solidly placed hand trap, and that's brutal. So I think that would be a cool addition. That's honestly the number one thing I see with this deck. I like both the traps. You have a good engine spell. You could add a second engine spell, I guess, but like I'd rather just have a second name. Just Martha's Hard Once Return. Once you go through her, it's nice to have even the potential to end on an even stronger end board than what you do right now, which is usually just like Magnifica with a back row or two. I think it'd be nice to have a higher ceiling than that. So yeah, that's the main thing for me. Honestly, I feel like I'm running in circles here, but this deck is pretty cut and dry. There's not a ton of options for this deck just because of the locks it already puts on itself. So it is very straightforward. I think it's a little easier to diagnose what I feel like is missing as opposed to Rescue Ace. Rescue Ace felt a lot more wide open, and a lot of people let me know in the comments that there were like way other directions you could go with support. But this is just where I land on it. So I'd love to see a second name, maybe even a third name too. You know what I mean? Like let's say a normal summon that's a 1-card rank 4, and even give us an additional extender that's just like a solid extender. It doesn't even have to be like out of this world crazy, but it's like it jumps on the field easily and it gets you a card, whether it's a draw or whatever. Like the other girl draws you a card, but she doesn't extend herself onto the field. So she's like kind of whack. Ideally, we'd be able to cut her and not lose any sleep about it. And if we got 2 names that like name each other, that have each other's names in their text, then those become your new best Vadis targets, right? And you can lean on that as well. So I don't know. I think that's where I land on it, is new main deck names to make the engine just stronger, not lose to 1, even 2 hand traps. Like good decks in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Can beat 2 hand traps. This deck definitely ain't beating 2 hand traps. 1 hand trap sometimes, 2 like never, it feels like. And I think that's the number 1 area I'd want to focus on here. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on EXOSISTER. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. I've never played this deck myself, so please don't take my word as gospel. This is just somebody from the outside looking in and trying to spark discussion about it. But if you have played EXOSISTER and you have a good amount of experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. from somebody who like was playing the deck as you felt the deck kind of slipping away in terms of power creep. What did it feel like to you was lacking when that wall kind of hit? I'd be curious to hear where somebody with experience talk on the subject. So throw those comments down in the the comment section below. But I'm out of here for today. Hopefully news soon. I think we have like still over like 50 cards left for Duelist Advance and like less than 30 days left. So it's coming in hot. But I'll keep you posted on anything news-wise that gets revealed. In the meantime, thanks for watching as always. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, news videos, deck profiles, all that stuff in the future. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.